Welcome, listeners. This is Sanjog Aul, your host, and the topic for our conversation today is building unified digital workspaces. And I have with me Zack Hicks. Zack is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer with Toyota Motor North America. Hey, Zack, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you doing today?
Very good, sir. Thank you for joining us. So businesses, as we know, need to be agile and responsive to compete to grow today. And they also need to be growing faster in the faster future ahead. And it depends on how well everyone involved connects, communicates, and collaborates. So the concept of digital workspaces, which has been proposed, is great, but it shouldn't be a privilege only for the office workers who are overlooking field staff and partners. So how does an organization implement fit-for-purpose yet unified workspaces to enable all involved? So that's the topic we wanted to cover. And to that end, Zack, my first question, while IT leaders are striving to offer ways to connect, communicate, and collaborate internally, and then also with partners and customers to enable efficiency, innovation, and growth, what should be the benchmarks?
I would start off by saying, if you haven't already begun the transformation at your company, you're probably a little bit already behind. But the good news is there's some great cloud and collaboration tools that are essential in the workplace to help enable this and remove those geographic barriers and provide more accessibility to customers and partners throughout the ecosystem. I can give you a great example. We at Toyota, we merged our manufacturing headquarters and our sales and marketing headquarters into a new location in Plano, Texas. So we moved from Southern California and Kentucky to Plano about 3 years ago. And as part of that remit, the CEO asked me to go out and check out what's the best in class. How can we begin to break down these barriers and allow people to work in new ways? And not just for the office worker, but for people across the enterprise. And so that was a tremendous opportunity to go out and see what tech companies are doing, and also new companies, how they were investing in collaboration tools. And also simultaneously, I think consumer expectations are really driving what you expect to have happen in the workplace. Frankly, you can't hire a new worker today and give them a desk phone that's him or her a desk phone that's keeping them tethered to the office. They're expecting to be able to use new mobility tools and be able to walk into a conference room and not be hindered by technology. Because frankly, a lot of these collaboration tools, while the promise was great, the actual delivery was not so great. So you'd walk into a conference room, you'd have to figure out, okay, is it a Polycom system or is this a Skype system? How are we going to connect and how do we get other people? Technology doesn't need to be this difficult. And that, I think, where we are today, the promise of technology was to remove a lot of these barriers, but the newer technologies are allowing us to actually do that. So a good example is what Microsoft is doing with their next generation of Office products. So when you book a meeting and you walk into the meeting room, those attachments that were part of the meeting, they're already available, or the PowerPoint presentation is already available up on the screen. You don't have to do a lot of fumbling around to be able to get to it. That's where we're at today. Maybe to be more direct to your question about what should people that are even outside of the workplace do, we have a tremendous focus on that. So on our manufacturing plant floor is a great example. We're taking data that's emitting out of our plant floor systems and giving that access to the data to the factory workers. They can understand when a machine is about to break before it breaks and impacts the quality of our vehicles. They can take action. And we're not doing that we're doing it through large boards if their hands are full, but we also give those tools through mobile devices that they can pull out. And if they're looking at the car that needs to be inspected, where is that car located? Giving them access to the vehicle and then telling them what the reasons why we're happy to look at that vehicle. So these are just some small examples, but across our whole enterprise, you've got people throughout our field organization that are visiting dealership or visiting plant, and we don't really care. I don't want to limit how they work. I want to give them access to the tools that they need when they need it ahead of time. And we should blur the lines of technology. Technology is really a tool, but quickly enable them to do the job that they're trying to do.
And a great response here. So the digital workspaces concept, which is what we believe we need, is where the users could engage with other people, the knowledge, and even the environment where they are in, with the sole purpose of getting the job done. That's what would be an ideal way to go about serving at all different levels, and no one is getting ignored. And we're not overlooking any field staff or partners. The underlying complexity that we find typically, which pulls us down, is the way we are trying to integrate with partner technology or the security, or even when we are trying to provision any capability, is what I'd like to use here, the word capability, like to provision it across multiple devices, and it should be such a way that it's hidden where we are allowing the location-based, the context-based, and environmental sensitivity of how that tool or that ecosystem works so that you're able to get the job done. Is this too futuristic? If not, then if the technology tools are there, then what holds us back?
I think that the technology is catching up. I think we have the opportunity now to deliver a much more seamless experience. But at the same time, at the corporate enterprise IT level, we have an obligation to make sure that the documents are secure and safe. They're also discoverable for e-discovery. There's a lot of regulations that require corporations to understand where their data is and who's using it. So you want to allow people to act as freely as they do in their home environment by able to use tools like Box or Dropbox or other collaboration tools like Slack. But you also need to have, you have to be able to balance that with the security risk and the e-discovery obligations and other regulatory requirements that are driving how we operate at the larger enterprise. But there are ways to do that. So you can lean into some of these new capabilities like Box and have a corporate enterprise agreement where consumers can, or the field users can easily upload or download documents or video files. But then when you have to provide that information to legal teams or so on, you have easy access to it. Or somebody leaves the company, you're making sure that those assets aren't going with them, that the company still has control of those assets that were created on behalf of the company. There is an opportunity to not go so far that you're losing control, but there is opportunities to be more open in these ecosystems. It wasn't long ago that in corporate enterprises, we provision devices, but now we also have the opportunity to enable bring your own device. So if somebody prefers using their own Android device, that's great. But what we may need to do is to provision a small portion of that device where we have full access and control for type of work, and then keeping the personal and the corporate. But another challenge that we have too in this new environment is knowledge sharing. As people come into the workplace, they want to be able to say, Google an answer. A good example of that is a new employee at Toyota might be working on a braking solution, and they want to know who knows anything about 1989 Camry brake. That may be hard to find if you don't know anybody, you're new to the company. But building a tool that we did, which is where all documents can be scanned and shared, you can search to say who knows anything about 1989 Camry, and we'll know here's who's at work today. And using some other technology to say that they're actually at their desk today, you can click on a button and interact with them, and then have a question and answer. So you're giving people access to a data if they want to search it, or maybe a knowledge repository of other humans that may be able to help you with the problem that you're working on. And really, that's the goal of your communication tools, to begin to break down those barriers between the worker and the information that they need.
And you so rightly point that this information is so critical for them to be able to do what they're supposed to do. So now, at the same time, what we have noticed, at least as media, we know that the inclusive approach that we would otherwise like to see when we are building these digital workspaces are few and far between. Because you take an example like a machine technician on the factory floor, or a hotel housekeeper, or a utility worker fixing the power lines. They're also serving the customer. They're also contributing towards customer satisfaction and retention. And they're no less in terms of how someone gets the satisfaction for the customer, or even uncover the new revenue opportunities. With all of that value already getting added, how come their device, the ones which they're using, or the applications or the software, whatever that we put on, make available to them, is not tethered to the main digital workspace ecosystem as effectively as someone who's in the office?
I think at Toyota, that's what we've done. So whether you're working on the plant floor, or you're working in our dealerships, or calling in our field, or interacting with our suppliers, you have full access to all the data and the tools that you need wherever you go. And that was a goal of what we've done here at Toyota. But I'll tell you, if for your example, if a maid in a hotel room doesn't have access to the data, wouldn't it be better, instead of having the hotel maid knocking on your door and disturbing you, to actually know, do we know from the digital key if somebody left the room, to be able to have access to the maid, to have access to say, I won't disturb this customer until they leave, and then I'll go in and clean the room, so I'll know when they've exited the room. It's just leveraging the data to make it work. And so if hotels or hospitals or other industries are not using it, others are going to step into this space and solve that problem at their expense. So there's an opportunity, and that's our job as IT leaders, to not be waiting to take the order from the customer, but to understand the capabilities that technologies bring, understand your business, and then be able to triangulate ahead of time where it intersects and can provide value for the customer and the employee.
That's a great example. And I'm assuming you had to shift the mindset of all people involved for them to see the value of what it takes to get a field worker also to contribute equally effectively as the in-office worker. So that's great. Now, coming to the environment that we are living in, which is a very externally focused, which means if we want to serve our customer, we have to work very closely with our partners. And there has also been challenges noted where it says that they are bringing their own partners' devices and systems, and we are trying to integrate with them, but that's where the problem is. And because the customer doesn't care how you are serving them, including the partners or not, that customer experience gets disrupted. So how can we address these integration challenges so that the digital workspaces we provide and use to serve the customer are in true sense unified?
One of the challenges that you're talking about here, the underlying technology, is that we don't have a homogeneous environment. We've got lots of different endpoint devices. And so when we say communicate, are we communicating through Skype or through voice or through a video conferencing? There's an endless number of ways of doing that. And that interoperability doesn't always work well. But at home, if we use Skype to talk to our family in maybe a different country, we're pretty happy to use a FaceTime. And if it drops, we understand, and I didn't really pay anything for it. But in the corporate environment, when you go into a meeting room in the middle of the meeting and the call drops or the video drops, nobody's happy. And so we do have a more contained and closed ecosystem when it comes into the corporate environments to be able to understand that. We also need to make sure there's security. So if we're talking about future designs of our next vehicle, we don't want our competitors to be able to hack in and get that data. So we want to know based on IP address who's on the line. So it is situational. And with our suppliers, we have fantastic integration because at Toyota, you may have heard of the just-in-time manufacturing methodology that we use. We need to know when we don't want to overstock parts, but when we only want those parts when we actually need them. And so we have tightly coupled relationships in those environments. But it's always a challenge, right? So if you're working with suppliers and they bring in their own device and they connect to your network, and if their software is out of compliance, you as a company may burden some legal risks. There are some limitations on being completely open, particularly from a security perspective.
Let's take a quick break, listeners. We'll be right back, and let's discuss about the availability and the quality of technology solutions that are available today so that you can literally have the right tool set to build a unified digital workspaces. Please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Motorola Solutions is a proud sponsor of this program. Do your industrial and commercial frontline workers communicate instantly, without boundaries, and with added intelligence? They can with Team Communications from Motorola Solutions. Our unified workgroup communications help teams collaborate regardless of device or network and share intelligence from purpose-built applications and the industrial Internet of Things. Your company becomes safer, more successful, and more efficient. And you can get started today using your current communication devices and networks. Learn more at motorolasolutions.com/team communications.
This is CTN Viewpoint on CIO Talk Network.
Welcome back. So, Zack, what would you say is the state of availability and quality of technology solutions that we require to build robust and unified digital workspaces, and that too using best-of-breed components?
I can tell you there are some amazing technologies that are available today, but I think that accessibility depends on several factors, such as what industry you're working in, what your security requirements are, what your customer needs are, your employee capabilities, and ultimately what's the business value. Toyota, our goal is to make collaboration for our workforce so natural that they're not even hindered by the technology, but rather, I guess you'd say, enabled by it. One way of doing that is to make the technology consistent and easy to use, regardless of the medium that's being used. So whether our users are using a mobile device in a parked car or a laptop in the field, or being in a conference room, you can connect with who you want in a consistent fashion, accept the data you need, and not just participate in collaboration, but contribute. And ultimately, that's where we want to go. As we're designing cars, those CAD systems, maybe if you have a model and you want to show somebody in a different country what that looks like, being able to share those files real time in a 3D fashion, and being able to blur the lines of distance is really what we're after. I'll tell you also that all of our offices are equipped with the state-of-the-art collaboration tools like Surface Hubs. So whether they're in our headquarters location in Plano, or they're in Michigan or Kentucky or a field office, you don't have to be in those rooms to be effective. Our goal is to provide a similar experience no matter where you're at. And even if you're in your hotel room and want to be able to join from your iPad, you can do that. Is it perfect yet? No. We're still rolling it out to 180 plus locations and outfitting with all that. It takes some time, but I also don't think we're ever going to be there. It's this constant iteration, and as technology improves, to be able to jump on that, but also to not make the technology a hurdle to get through. We launched a startup company that I'm also CEO of called Toyota Connected, which is a goal is to unleash the power of data for our customers and our employees. And our motto is we want to free people from the tyranny of technology. Because I think today we've got the app by app experience. You're using your mobile device different from your desktop, it's different from your car computing. And then you go into a meeting room and it's different. We can begin to blur those lines to make it much more seamless. And so that's why I talk about it. You're never done. We're always on the journey, and we'll continue to iterate on that.
And given the current state, whatever you mentioned in terms of the technology solutions that are available, do you think whosoever is producing these solutions, or maybe you as the adopter, are you assuming that they're being geared towards these digital workspaces, which is the end outcome of putting these tools together and integrating them, to be equally accessible? Or maybe we'll give it that, okay, it may be accessible to people, but is it done with a usefulness for both in and out of office workers? Or are we just taking the broad spectrum of users and just say, okay, as long as it works for them, we're good? But that's where we would lose. Yeah, that's where we will lose the true value that you can get by making it unified.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these tools are great, and they can enable some amazing connections. Our parent companies in Japan, I go to Japan every month, but I also spend a lot of time on video conferences, interacting with my colleagues in Japan. It's a great way to keep the conversation going, and also my colleagues around the world. But I'll tell you what, if you got a bad meeting in person is just as probably even worse than a bad meeting that distributed environment. So the technology enables humans to connect in better ways, but if the humans aren't connecting in a meaningful way, that's not the problem with the technology. That's probably the problem of planning that meeting. I think there's two problems in there that you're trying to solve for. The technology is enabler, and sometimes it's cumbersome, but for the most part, what we're thinking, particularly on our new campus, is it's becoming much more frictionless. You can walk into a room. I don't have to dial 20 numbers to connect with Japan. I can push a button and my colleagues are there, and I can see them, and it feels like a much more in-person experience.
So the scope that you just mentioned, just to follow up on this, that was more an office worker with someone dialing from home, but they're still in a way in-office type workers. I'm talking about, say, a field staff wants to chime in.
I'll give you a great example. I'm sorry. I mean, I hope to talk to you, but I'll tell you a great example that we do is, so now when we launch a vehicle, and let's say the brand new vehicle, and if there's a condition that happens on that vehicle that we've never seen before, one of the great things that we can do is that we have a local field technician show up to that vehicle, use an iPad or an iPhone or whatever device they've got, and they can video stream in a secure way to our other engineers so they can see firsthand without having to be there themselves. So by no means do we have the hierarchical approach to collaboration tools, but only office workers get it and other people don't. That's not the case. If a company is doing that, you're not engaging your workforce appropriately. And we're all walking around with these devices today. Why not enable them?
Now, let's talk about the readiness check that we should do upfront in terms of trying to build the unified digital workspaces, and then also the fixes that we need to make in terms of the processes, the workflow, and even the culture, so that the end outcome is achieved. And this basically helps you build that foundation based on which any unified digital workspace would thrive.
Yeah, I think that probably the most important thing is to have a compelling vision and understanding what you're aiming for. Buying the tools without a vision, it can be a waste of time and a waste of money. What we did here on our new campus, we thought about it more holistically about all of the workers. So if a worker's on the road and they're having to upload reports at home, how will they do that? Do they have to open up their laptop and wait for it to boot, or can we do this on a mobile device like an iPad So they don't have to do that. Can they just take a picture of the problem and have that be and use optical character recognition to begin filling out the problem for them? But for the office worker, we make a booking for a reservation, having digital cues for the meeting room. So we've got the little devices or LCD displays that show you who's in the room and who's booked it. And if the meeting room isn't being used for 15 minutes, we use the sensors to free up the room so somebody else can use it. And then when you've booked the meeting, you've got people around the world that need to join. They just click one button to join the meeting. They don't have to dial a series of buttons. We knew what we were willing to invest in and how we wanted the experience to flow. So having that vision of what the experience should be like and then backing into what technology can enable it is a much better plan than just jumping right into the technology. And then you've got to have the leaders buy it and work at all levels. The people that really facilitate most of the communication in the company, or a lot of it, oftentimes are the admin assistants who have to book the senior executives meetings, have to make sure the calendars are available, and so on. So having them be part of the solution and pulling in people at all levels to define what that communication strategy or the tool should look like. And then I also think about pushing it more onto the cloud so it's not location specific. So you can enable all workers in any environment to join in. And then join a larger concentric circle to think about how do your partners want to engage? And can they help participate in designing that solution? But also oftentimes it's our partners that are troubleshooting these solutions for us too, if any network is outsourced. So including them in that design so that they can help troubleshoot when things do go. I would think stepping back, looking at the macro view, and then building a plan, understand the cost, getting leaders buy-in, but not the leaders, but buy-in at every level of the organization.
And let's talk about the adoption challenges one will face, because there is diversity of mindset and there is an issue with digital readiness, and especially when you bring in out of office workers, which again doesn't mean someone working remotely from home, but actually someone from your field staff or partners. They may not have come across those devices or the new technologies or new way of communicating before your overall organization can enjoy the unified digital workspaces and that related experience. These people have to be brought on board and they have to adopt it for you to say, yes, I got something done and in its entirety.
That's a great question. When we planned our new corporate headquarters, we had a lot of conversations around, well, we're even going to put desk phones on the desk anymore. And we opted to not to, because with Skype on the desktop and Skype for Business, we simply didn't need it any. The digital natives had no problems adapting to that, but maybe people that were more experienced in the career were more concerned with, I don't have a phone and what am I going to do? And we had to explain that you're actually going to have a phone no matter where you take your laptop or mobile device, you'll be able to answer it wherever you're at. So you're going to have actually better access than having a desk phone. But that took some time. And so what we did was we also created a brand around the new compute and communication suite that we called Workplace of the Future, and WF, Workplace of the Future, short, and called it WOOF. And we'd WOOF champion in every group. And we had them participate in the solution building. We gave them things like t-shirts that are easily identifiable, but then they helped train all the people around them, or it could be a resource if somebody was struggling. So we didn't want it to be IT's problem to solve. We wanted it to be collectively Toyota's problem to solve and engage many more people. And the people that raised their hand and wanted to join in and help be the solution provider really were tremendous. It was a great way of engaging the organization in a new way and not just relying on the IT staff to do that. And I'll tell you, the other key thing that we had to do, which was always monitoring, checkpoint, understanding of how it was working and iterate and being able to make changes along the way. Just like in any agile project, is getting that customer feedback and quickly responding and incorporating. That's been crucial.
Let's talk about the business demands and the people expectations and the technology. All of these are going to continue to change. How do you think we can keep these digital workspaces unified and healthy?
Well, it's going to take a constant investment. And that's why what we try to do is to continue to iterate and not just go all in, but allow some space for flexibility and keep more of an open mind on standards. Because what a standard works today, there's a very good chance that tomorrow new technology will blow up that standard and that standard will be out of date. If you're not flexible, you're missing out on opportunities. There's also opportunities to really drive out costs. So there is an investment side of the equation, but there was also places where we were able to take out cost. Understanding the new ecosystem and just frankly understanding that the world is changing faster than the corporate enterprise typically are willing to handle it. You've got to become much more agile in our approach and a little bit less rigid, and knowing where to lock things down. So if it's access to secure documents or data, that's always going to be locked down. But if it's data that could be out, workers do their jobs in new ways, or consumers understand more about our products or services, then we need to be more flexible in opening that. But staying in for a holistic communications environment, that's probably not going to happen because new entrants will always enter in the market and there'll be new opportunities. But how do we enable that interoperability is the opportunity in keeping that mindset open. Because for example, like we use at Toyota today, we use Box, but we also use Microsoft SharePoint and other shared collaboration tools. I don't want to have to dictate just one. I'd like to give a couple of solutions, but all of those solutions allow me to do data privacy management, document management, and those types of governance processes that I need to run a regulated environment. So it's about that flexibility with an eye towards the future, and also understanding that your customer base is going to evolve, and our job as IT leaders is to enable that evolution.
Once again, thank you, Zack, for sharing your thoughts and insights about how organizations can implement a fit-for-purpose yet unified workspaces as a critical step towards increasing efficiency, accelerating innovation, and boosting revenue.
Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much again, Zack. And listeners, I invite you to find related conversations on our website at ciotalknetwork.com.